Hello, everyone. I hope you're well. My name is Dr. Chingwe, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on another episode of Studying the Life of Daniel. Today, we're looking at Daniel chapter 3, and we'll read a few verses, and and just read out from this book. I'll put the link to buy it to get this if you want one from on Amazon, if you will. So, we're reading Daniel chapter 3, verse 1 to 7, and it says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So it sounds quite repetitive, isn't it? Like, this is the thing he has set up, this is the thing he has set up. They are all called to the dedication. So verse 4 says, Then a herald cried aloud, To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and psaltery and symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, and the lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Okay, so that phrase Nebuchadnezzar had set up happens in verse 2, it happens in verse 3 two times, and then it happens in verse 5, and then it happens in verse 7. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times that phrase is repeated, Nebuchadnezzar has set up, which for me is quite instructive, because if it's not something that God has set up, we should not be worshiping it at all, no matter who this person is has set up. So it was like a reminder to emphasize this is not an image God has set up, because that will be violating his commandments not to set up any image at all to replicate who he is. So the reason why Nebuchadnezzar had set up this image is not particularly clear from this text that we're reading. But let's read from the book and see what the discussion I wrote to help with the understanding. So the image Nebuchadnezzar set up was almost 10 times as tall as it was wide. And this is my maths brain coming in, 90 feet by 9 feet. And it was about 10 times Goliath's height. For its size, it's more likely that the image was built with a cheaper material and then overlaid with gold and not made of solid gold fully. So I got that from the NET Notes, New English Translation. I think that's what it stands for. Every person in authority in any part of his province was summoned to the dedication of his statute. After all kinds of music played, everyone was to bow and pay homage to the golden image. Doesn't this suggest or show the power of music to do as the singer or the artist has suggested? You can imagine sometimes when there's a song going, oh, bend down low, and everybody starts going down low, or put your hands in the air, and I mean those are sort of clean ones. But you can imagine that it's people tend to become what they sing to themselves. That's the power, that shows the power of music. He seemed to rage at anyone who didn't do what he wanted, sentencing them to immediate death. In this case, they were going to be thrown into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. The image that he had in his dream only had his head and probably his neck made of gold, but this statue was fully covered with gold on the outside. Maybe he was trying to overwrite a prophecy by erecting a fully golden image to deceive himself at least into believing that his kingdom would last forever, as it was. The golden image was set up in the same place that Daniel and his friends had some authority over the province of Babylon. Yes, they had authority, but they were still under the king's rulership. They still had to go and come and do at his command. Today, though we are not of this world, God has made us kings and priests to rule and to reign till all the kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ. You can read that in Revelation 11 verse 15. Bowing down to worship other gods may be an explicit or indirect call to compromise our Christian values for fear of incurring the wrath or disfavor of those in leadership over us. Like Jesus said, we should only fear him, that is, fear God, who can destroy both body and the soul in hell. Any consequence, which I would say the highest of it would be death, is only destroying this outer body. And we know that we are spirit beings having a soul and living in a physical body. We're spirit beings having a physical experience. So as in verse 7, everyone who heard the music bowed down and paid homage to the erected golden statue. So the questions I put at the end of this particular section was: did Nebuchadnezzar set up the image based on his dream, making it all gold so that he could override the declining glory over time after his reign? And the second question was: why was it so important to the king for everyone to worship his golden statue? So have a think about that. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you carry on to the next section, that's Daniel 3, 8 to 12. It says, therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. So it sounds like this did not just start from this image, because that phrase, or that sentence, shall we say, says, they do not serve your gods. So in other words, they have probably monitored the lives of and how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have conducted their affairs in Babylon, despite being, rulers of different provinces in Babylon. They just refused to serve God, because if you go back to Daniel chapter 1, these were the people that refused to defile themselves with the king's meat. They're talking about food, talk less of now worshiping another God that God explicitly commanded with the commandments not to do. So in terms of the discussion points, is what I said. The instruments used for this image worship: cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music. Some of these instruments you, like me, have probably never heard of before, but they were likely either wind or string instruments. And it looks like the array of all kinds of music was the necessary precursor before the people bowed to worship. The accusers seem to have had beef with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego long before the day of the image worship. They made their refusal personal to Nebuchadnezzar by saying, they serve not thy gods, and that they have not regarded thee. So they fine-tuned and redirected the accusation against those men, those Jewish men, at Nebuchadnezzar's personal ego. And we know that he had one, because when they refused to when his advisors could not interpret his dreams, he was like, I'm going to kill all of you, essentially. So we know that they were sort of speaking to his ego, because they probably knew that if they can hurt his ego, then he's likely to do something quite drastic. So carrying on, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego must have proven themselves faithful over the affairs of the province of Babylon, that there was nothing that they could be accused of except for their faith. The accusers could have been stroking Nebuchadnezzar's ego by calling him, O king, at the beginning of his sentence, O king, O king. Doesn't the phrase certain Jews whom you appointed remind you of Adam telling God in Genesis chapter 3 verse 12 that it was the woman you gave me, it was the woman you gave me? I refer to the words of these people having beef with the Hebrew guys as showing the anatomy of accusation. First, it points the finger at the one who the accused is brought before as being at fault or being responsible for responding to whatever fault the accuser finds with the accused. Okay, so they pointed the finger at Nebuchadnezzar, saying you were the one that appointed them, and you are the one, so therefore you're responsible for dealing with the consequences of your actions, for appointing these people that don't serve your gods and have refused to worship your golden image. You are responsible for sorting that out, and sort of accusing him that is because they were in the palace with serving Nebuchadnezzar, and that's why they maybe had the guts to decide not to serve his gods. Just as Satan accused Job before God as being his fault for putting a hedge of protection around Job, his house, and all that he had. You can see that in Job chapter 1 verse 10. And like Adam did with Eve and with God in Genesis 3. We need to watch our words about others, that they are not laced with accusations that blame or fault the hearer for the accused actions or attitude. Second, the way they phrased their malicious accusations made the king to take it personal. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego just didn't bow to his statue, just like how they refused to eat the king's meat. It looked like they wanted the king to feel stupid for appointing such dissidents to be rulers in his province. Third, they interpreted the differentness of the Hebrews and their refusal to serve his gods or the golden image as a sign of disrespect to the king. If not for the malice in their hearts, they could also have just seen it as that they served another god. After all, it was very likely a polytheistic society, so they had multiple gods. So they could have chucked it down to, they're just serving a different kind of god that we're not serving. These Chaldeans may be like some of our colleagues at work who, because the Hebrew men were not Babylonians, referred to them as certain Jews, using a different sort of identity to class them and to make them feel different. And because they behaved differently, not conforming to the culture of the place, they tried to bring them down. And it is very likely that they were unhappy that the king had promoted them to higher positions than themselves, especially as they were not only foreigners, but also part of the captive slaves. The same Chaldeans whose lives had been saved by the gift of Daniel's dream recall and interpretation, backed up by the prayers of his guys Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were the same ones who now accused him. Doesn't that remind you of Jesus when the people that he had healed, he had fed 5,000, fed 4,000, had, they said, Hosanna, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. These were the ones they were still shouting, crucify him in the end. So that's why the Bible also says of Jesus, he did not commit himself to anybody because he knew what was in the hearts of men. He knew that the hearts of men can be quite fickle at times. The Chaldeans' accusations was also from a place of betrayal, as they could have shielded their standing for their faith from the king, who couldn't have enforced 100% compliance in all of Babylon for all to bow to his golden image. This can be parallel to our colloquial terms, they threw them under the bus. So that's what essentially they did. They threw them under the bus. And the prayer I put at the end here is, Lord, help me to respect my colleagues' individualities and personalities, and instead focus on the aspects of their lives that add value to everyone at work. Help me never to be an accuser. And the declaration is, I am never an accuser, in Jesus' name. So that means even if you find a colleague doing something that you don't necessarily agree with, don't never ever go the point of phrasing it in an accusatory tone. If you're trying, even if it's something that you have to escalate to their bosses, if you're trying to escalate it, always make sure that you are focusing on the action of the person, not accusing them before their line managers or before somebody else for whatever reason. So I have 3 questions here at the end of this one. And the first is, how long after Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream was this image built? One Bible commentary puts it at 19 years. So whether they had forgotten at that point that these were the guys that saved their behinds from being killed, only God knows. Have you ever been the subject of an accusation that put you out of favor with leaders? How did it all end? Check that your heart is now clear of all bitterness. Since all the rulers were called together, where do you think Daniel was, especially as he was ruler over the whole province of Babylon? I think that's a question that has many people have tried to answer. So you can decide to just look for answers online, see if you can find anything interesting. Let me know in the comments. And my prayer is that as you go into this week, this month, the rest of the year, that even when things might get hot and you want to lash out, you want to hurt somebody back for what they're doing, or somebody is doing something different to how you're doing, you have a different belief with somebody, you would never take on the position of the enemy, because the Bible calls him the accuser of the brethren. You would never take on that sort of attitude or that sort of mindset towards your colleagues, whether they are believers or not, in terms of talking about them in an accusatory form, that every time you speak about them, whether you are trying to objectively deal with a situation, your heart will be steeped in a place of love and a place of understanding, a place that you are trying to help them be better, trying to help the company fulfill its objectives. And I just pray that God helps you. Just let me know what you think of this few verses we've read. So we've just done Daniel 3, the first 2 sections of Daniel 3 from this book, verse 1 to 12, and then we'll carry on in the next video talking about what happened after it. Some of you know the story. If not, just wait till then, next week, and we would carry on talking about the life of Daniel. Again, the link to this would be in the description. If you like this video, if you learned something from it, please subscribe, comment, like, share with your network, and most importantly, just go back into the Bible and read the story for yourself. If you find the KJV translation a bit difficult, the NLT, I would recommend the New Living Translation. And the one that I use currently for my daily Bible reading is the Message translation, just because it gives me a different, perspective most times. And because I grew up reading KJV, I'm used to it. And sometimes being too familiar with something can, if you're not careful, you lose the virtue and the beauty of the words that God is speaking to us through his word. I hope that blessed you. Have an amazing rest of the day or evening, whatever you're up to. God bless you. Take care. Bye.